Okay, hi, me again. Astrology and history, this will be the last video. I'm gonna go to the beginning of the chapter and read you how I go into the chapter, and then it goes into Rome, and then Greece and, Egypt and India, Mesopotamia. So we end at the beginning. And I'm just gonna start with the intro and then go into Rome. Astrology and History from the second book, The Intermediate's Guide to the Mystery Sciences by me. No study of the macrocosm would ever be complete without some basic knowledge of astrology. What we need to understand before we dive deep into our solar system is that we are also diving deep into our past. The ancient cultures from all over this globe have made sure to preserve the circulations of the stars in religions, traditions, festivals, and language. To fully grasp the concepts of any of those ideas, we must search the origins thereof, and we must search in many places. What is most familiar to the English reading student is the Christian Bible. Let us start there and work our way backward in time. Christian astrology in the Bible. Genesis chapter 1 says that the first thing God created was the heavens, and that the lights therein were placed there to be separations of the day and night, for signs, for seasons, and for lights to shine on the earth. These are all truths which mystery sciences can confirm. They are, however, only half-truths, for each has a layered meaning. Even as the creation story has its hidden meaning, so too does the entirety of the Torah. The woman, Eve in Genesis, was said to have been tricked by the serpent into eating of the fruits of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Let's back that up. The woman, Eve, in Genesis, was said to have been tricked by the serpent, Kundalini, into eating, consuming of the fruits, physical realm application, of the tree of knowledge, tree of life, of good and evil, polarity and duality. It seemed to the uneducated reader that an outside force was the reason for the temptation of the fall of man. One often forgets to consider the free will aspect of choice in all living creatures. In Exodus, the building of the Ark of the Covenant is a reflection of the macrocosm. The 7 lamps, 7 planets, the 2 cherubim, day and night, the 4 rings at the corners, yugas, the crown of gold around it, the ecliptic, the length of the ark, 2.5 cubits, representing a time, 2 times, and half a time, as mentioned in both Daniel and Revelation. The candlestick with 3 branches coming out of either side, tree of life, horns of the incense altar, age of Aries, were all graven images to designate respect and honor to the starry world of the macrocosm. The purpose of the Ark of the Covenant was to be a communication device between fallen man, loss of third eye, and the biblical God. In the same days of the Ark of the Covenant, Moses was inclined to design the ephod, the apron of the servants of God. Whoever wore the ephod was said to have the power of the 12 tribes for divination and communication with God. On it were placed 12 precious stones to represent the 12 tribes of Israel, which are much like the 12 disciples of Jesus, representative of the 12 zodiacal constellations. This tradition is, in fact, where we get our birthstones from. Also, inside the breastplate of the ephod is hidden the sacred Urim and Thummim stones, which are divination tools for requesting advice from the higher planes, traditionally a Norse rune divination practice. The black stone signified a yes answer, while the white stone signified a no. In 2 Kings chapter 17, the various gods mentioned having been worshipped there were the Pleiades as Sukkot Benoth, Mars as Nergal, the moon as Anamelech, and Venus as Ashima. In the 23rd chapter of 2 Kings, the idols of these gods were burned, along with the idols made for Baal and the Mazzaroth. The Mazzaroth, the 12 constellations of the zodiac, is again mentioned in Job chapter 38, along with Orion, the Pleiades, and Ursa Major. In chapter 26 of Job, the constellation Draco is mentioned as the crooked snake, or in some versions, the fugitive snake. Previously, in chapter 9 of Job, the chambers of the south are referenced in accordance with the constellations of Carina, the Southern Cross, and Centaurus. Another constellation mentioned in this book is the Hyades as Ash or Aish. Isaiah chapter 14, in its famous fallen angel speech, is likely the most abominable of misconstrued astrological references. Hellel/Lucifer, the morning star, is a reference to Venus. Venus rules both Libra, balance, and Taurus, growth, on the zodiac. The fall of Lucifer was when people of the nations began to worship the planet and its signs, as opposed to letting them guide the people to the proper worship of the Creator. It also concerns cosmic circulations, but we will get to that later. For now, if you remember nothing else from this chapter, please commit to memory the fact that Lucifer is actually Venus and in no way related to the Christian version of the existence of a cloven-footed, stolen from the Greek god Pan, devil/demon, mutilated version of astrological deacons, who occasionally torture souls between talking to God, as in Job, and plotting on humans. Insert eye roll here. In chapter 46, Isaiah mentions Mercury as Nebo, or Neba. Isaiah also mentions the worship of Jupiter as Gad and Venus again as Meni in chapter 65, verse 11. Amos chapter 5 again references Orion as Kisel and the Pleiades as Kima in verse 8. In verse 26, Amos mentions Saturn as Kaiwan, Chiun, and Moloch. I could certainly continue to give examples of astrological references in the Christian Bible, but my point is that when you know what to look for, having eyes to see, you can see through the literal explanation of words and into the ideas behind them. Let us consider that concept as we slide over to ancient Rome for a minute. Founded in or around 753 BC, Rome was the retelling of the exodus of the Hebrew slaves from Egypt to their new promised land, but from a different culture and at a later date. The story of Rome's founding is highly astrological, just as is the story of Jesus. And then it goes into the Roman foundation story. Not so much the Roman gods, because we already did that with Greece. Rome was founded by Romulus, an ancestor of Aeneas. This, in itself, traces the bloodline of Rome back to the gods. In major ancient cities of Italy, Greece, and Great Britain, it was common that the kingship be given to one who could prove bloodline lineage to the gods. The same was common for the priesthood of the Jews, who had to be able to prove their lineage to the tribes of Israel, namely the tribe of Levi. Jesus' lineage was established to date back to the tribe of Judah in the first chapter of the New Testament so as to legitimize the story of his life as being worthy of note. Norse custom was the same, where even now last names are some derivative of showing the lineage. And that's like, Williamson, Thompson, McKay's, Mick Williams, whatever. Mick means grandson of and son means son of. Aeneas was said to be a pious man above all else. He was born of a love affair between the goddess Venus and a human prince of Troy. Anchises, Anchises, Anchises. According to ancient customs, see also Genesis 6, this would make him a demigod, Nephilim, or giant. The story goes that he helped Priam, his cousin, defend Troy from the Greek advance and escaped Troy before the siege, made famous by the Iliad of Homer, and then carried his frail father away, finding sanctuary in Italy. His own odyssey led Aeneas to Latium, Latium, a neighbor to Etrusia, or Etrusca, as a Etrusca. It looks like Etrusca, but I want to be like it's Etrusia. But whatever. Where he found favor with the demigod king Latinus, who was the son of Odysseus and Circe, if we remember the several days/years he hung out with her. So where he found favor with the demigod king Latinus, married the princess Lavinia, and named a city for her where he ruled. Either his deceased wife, Creusa, or Lavinia, depending on the source, bore him a son, Ascanius, or Julius. Ascanius founded a city called Alba Longa. Upon his death, Ascanius' son Aeneas Silvius ruled Alba Longa. Aeneas Silvius. In Alba Longa, the lineage of Aeneas Silvius, all descendants thereof were given the surname Silvius for some reason. Ruled for nearly 4 centuries before the founding of Rome in Alba Longa. The throne passed to Procca. Procca had 2 sons, the elder Numitor and the younger Amulius. Numitor had no sons, but a daughter called Rhea Silvia. In a true Jacob and Esau manner, the younger Amulius stole the birthright of Numitor and ascended to the throne after Procca. Then, for good measure, Amulius cast his niece, Rhea Silva, into the pagan equivalent of a convent. She was to live the chaste life of a Vestal virgin princess. This was considered a kindness because he would otherwise have killed her to prevent the birth of a son who could claim the throne that he stole. Here we come to the virgin birth part of the story. Sound familiar? Every religion has one. Rhea Silvia, Virgo, was then impregnated by the god Mars, which means Mars was in Virgo, and birthed not 1 but 2 male heirs, twins, Gemini. To ensure they would not come back to reclaim the throne, the king then takes on the role of Pharaoh in the story of Moses. He decreed that the boys be drowned in the river Tiber, the constellation Eridanus. But the servants spared their lives in a basket, a winnowing basket, which was found by a she-wolf under the constellation of Lupus or Canis Minor, who nursed them until the shepherd, or Auriga, A-U-R-I-G-A, Faustulus, the shepherd Faustulus, found them and raised them as his own. Romulus and Remus were their names. In their youth, the boys were said to have taken on a Robin Hood quality, whereby they stole from the rich to give to the poor. This was a cause which led to a very great effect. One evening, while the boys were drunk and celebrating, the effect came upon them. A brawl ensued, and the young Remus was taken to Numitor for judgment of the plundering on his land. Hearing this, Faustulus confessed to Romulus the truth of their past. Meanwhile, Numitor interrogated Remus. He knew the boy's true heritage and welcomed him as his grandson. When Romulus arrived with his band to rescue his brother from captivity, he too was welcomed as royal blood. Together, the 3 killed King Amulius, giving Numitor back the throne of Alba Longa. Rather than wait for their inheritance of their throne, the twins argued over who would reign over the new city that they would establish and where it would be located. The wise King Numitor suggested they solve their quarrel by augury, divination of the will of the gods by observation of behavioral patterns in sacred birds. This is back to Aquila in the stars. This, they agreed, would be righteous, but did not establish the terms. Whether the sign would be flight patterns, feeding habits, the number of flock, or whatever. There's lots of different ways to do augury. So in the proper Cain and Abel tradition, Romulus defeated Remus in combat and won the spoils. He built his city at the foot of the Palatine Hill and called it Rome. Building the city was not as challenging for Romulus as was populating it. The band of men loyal to Romulus was not enough to ensure its survival, as they would eventually need heirs. Neighboring cities refused to send daughters to Rome, so Romulus held the largest festival of games around, inviting all neighboring tribes and countrymen to celebrate with them. The Sabines, in particular, attended in vast numbers. In this Enochian part of the tale, the Romans took for themselves wives among the visitors, all that they pleased. When the men tried to retake their women, war ensued, and the only reason this did not end in a massacre was because of the women themselves, who in a Pocahontas-like spirit jumped onto the battlefield and demanded a truce be made. Bold mood for women in this area. Very impressive. So Rome now had land, women, and allies, or in-laws. I don't know that you would say allies, but in-laws or allies or whatnot. The death of Romulus was reported to have been much like the taking of Enoch into the heavens, or the ascension of the risen Jesus. He was there, a storm cloud came, then he was gone. Whatever the cause, the effect was that his name and therefore legacy was deified forever in the minds and hearts of that culture. The correlations between this story and the Hebrew Torah are equally as impressive as to the ones between the Egyptian Horus and the Hebrew Jesus. It seems as though history repeats itself, whether in action or in myth. But the truth of the astrological meaning behind these tales is ever hidden in plain sight. The pantheon of gods celebrated by the Romans were taken from the Greek pantheon, which was adapted from their understanding of the Egyptian gods. Thoth, in the Emerald Tablets, tells the men of Chem to remember these secrets he gives by making a religion of it. Only then, he asserts, will the secrets live through the ages. Though he acknowledges that only a memory of God shall remain, this advice was followed by the men of Chem as well as the Greeks and Romans. And then I go into ancient Greek mythology, so boom. And we are done with astrology and history according to the Intermediate's Guide to the Mystery Sciences. Thank you very much.